Imagine trying to fall asleep on a sweltering summer night, with nothing but a damp sheet for relief. No hum of a fan, no blast of cold air from a vent, just the heavy heat pressing down on you. For generations, this wasn't some thought experiment. It was simply life. Before central air became the quiet companion of every household, people had to be clever, resilient, and often communal in the ways they battled the sun. Daily schedules bent around the heat, homes were built with cooling in mind, and families turned to traditions that might seem unthinkable now. But it wasn't all misery. These adaptations created culture, community, and innovation that defined summer life for decades. Tonight, we uncover 10 ways people survived the heat before air conditioning ever existed. Long before air conditioning units buzzed outside of every home, the very design of the house itself was the first and most important defense against the summer heat. Architects and builders of the 19th and early 20th centuries didn't just think about aesthetics, they thought about survival. They understood one simple principle: hot air rises. And with that knowledge, homes were often built with ceilings so high they seemed to scrape the sky. The goal wasn't grandeur, but comfort. By sending hot air up and away from the people below, these towering ceilings created pockets of cooler air where families could gather. But high ceilings were just the beginning. Windows, tall and wide, were placed with precision. It wasn't enough to have light. You needed airflow. Builders often positioned windows directly across from one another, creating what's known as a cross breeze. When one window was opened on one side of a house and its twin on the opposite side was pushed up, the home itself became a wind tunnel. Air would sweep through, carrying away the day's heat and replacing it with fresh evening air. This wasn't accidental. It was intentional, a design rooted in an intimate relationship with the climate. Then came the transom window, a small but powerful invention. Sitting above door frames, these hinged windows allowed hot air to escape even when doors were closed for privacy. It meant a house could maintain both modesty and circulation, keeping families comfortable while still upholding the standards of the time. With doors open, transoms created a flow from room to room, ensuring no space was left stifling. All of these features turned houses into living, breathing structures, ones that worked with nature rather than against it. Imagine stepping into such a home on a hot afternoon. The high ceilings give a sense of space. The cross breeze whispers through the parlor, and the transom windows quietly vent the hot air that tries to settle in. No machines, no electricity, just thoughtful, climate-aware construction. These were homes that cooled themselves. And while modern construction often prioritizes insulation and efficiency, those earlier generations understood something we've nearly forgotten. The house wasn't just a place to live in. It was a partner in enduring the heat. Before the days of cold air blasting from a vent, the front porch was more than a decorative addition to a home. It was a survival tool. During the sweltering summer months, when interiors turned into heat traps, families would escape to the shaded safety of the porch. Built large and covered, it became the most important room in the house, a place where people could breathe easier, rest, and reconnect with neighbors. On hot evenings, you wouldn't find families sitting inside. You'd find them outside in rocking chairs, fanning themselves, sipping iced tea or lemonade, and talking about the day's events. The porch was a gathering place where community ties were strengthened, where children played tag until the sun set, and where adults shared gossip or read the evening paper in the cooling breeze. In many towns, porches linked households together, creating a kind of extended living room that belonged to the entire neighborhood. The very design of porches reflected this purpose. Elevated slightly from the street, wide enough for chairs and swings, and shaded by deep overhangs, they gave residents both a view and a retreat. Unlike today's decorative porches, these were lived-in spaces: dining rooms, living rooms, even bedrooms on especially hot nights. They symbolized a culture of openness and connection, a time when families didn't hide behind closed doors and air conditioning units, but sat out front, visible and approachable. As the evening cooled, fireflies glowed, crickets sang, and the porch transformed into a stage for summer life. Children caught lightning bugs in jars, while elders told stories that drifted into the night air. It was a rhythm that defined community living, and for many, it was the highlight of the day. But as air conditioning grew in popularity, something shifted. Families no longer needed the porch for relief, and television soon replaced front porch conversations with indoor entertainment. The decline of the porch as a cultural hub mirrored a shift in American life, away from communal living and toward private, climate-controlled comfort. What was once the heart of summer evenings slowly faded into nostalgia, leaving behind memories of a time when the simple act of sitting outside held the power to cool both body and spirit. When the heat of summer refused to let go, even after the sun went down, families turned to one of the most beloved traditions of the pre-air conditioning era: the sleeping porch. These weren't ordinary porches where you might sit and watch the world go by during the day. These were carefully designed, often screened-in spaces, usually on the second floor of a home, created specifically for sleeping during the hottest months of the year. Upstairs, bedrooms could easily become unbearable ovens, holding on to the day's heat long into the night. So families would drag mattresses, sheets, and pillows out to the porch, turning it into an open-air bedroom cooled by night breezes. The screens kept the mosquitoes at bay, while the gentle flow of air brought a comfort no closed room could offer. For children, it felt like an adventure, drifting off to sleep under a canopy of stars while the hum of crickets filled the night. For adults, it was a relief that went beyond comfort. It was a health practice. At the time, doctors believed that circulating fresh air was essential in preventing illness, especially tuberculosis, which was feared in the early 20th century. Sleeping outdoors wasn't just practical. It was thought to be medicinal, a cure for the body as much as a balm for the heat. Entire families often slept side by side, lined up on cots or mattresses, creating memories of whispered stories, shared laughter, and the occasional summer storm that sent everyone scrambling back indoors. In cities, the concept was adapted to balconies and rooftop sleeping, with some families hauling bedding up flights of stairs for a night of relief beneath the open sky. This ritual became so common that many houses built in the late 1800s and early 1900s came with designated sleeping porches as a standard feature. But just like the front porch, the sleeping porch began to vanish as air conditioning spread. What was once a necessity faded into memory, leaving behind an almost romantic image of a time when people slept in harmony with the night, lulled by the natural rhythms of summer instead of the steady hum of a machine. For families lucky enough to have electricity in the early 20th century, one invention changed the fight against the summer heat forever: the electric fan. Introduced in the 1880s and becoming more common in homes by the 1920s and 30s, the fan didn't cool the air itself, but it made heat bearable by keeping it moving. A stagnant, heavy room could suddenly feel alive again with a breeze circulating through it, and people quickly began to realize that, with a little ingenuity, fans could do more than just push hot air around. Some families would set a massive block of ice or a bowl filled with ice water directly in front of the fan, turning it into a primitive but surprisingly effective cooling system. The air blowing across the ice carried with it a chilled mist that spread through the room like a whisper of modern air conditioning. Others relied on the science of evaporation. A damp sheet, hung in front of an open window or positioned in front of a fan, created the same effect that cools our skin when sweat evaporates. As the water in the cloth dried, it pulled heat from the surrounding air, dropping the temperature just enough to give a sense of relief. These were the hacks of necessity, small adjustments that turned simple machines into life-saving tools during blistering summers. In some neighborhoods, the gentle hum of fans became the background noise of long, hot nights, their steady blades pushing back the suffocating air trapped inside homes. For children, it became a game to sit in front of the spinning blades and talk, their voices turned robotic and funny by the vibrations in the moving air. But behind the laughter, the fan represented a lifeline. It was modern, it was accessible, and with a few clever tricks, it was the closest thing most households would get to air conditioning until decades later. Fans turned summer misery into something just manageable, bridging the gap between pure endurance and the luxury of real mechanical cooling. Before refrigerators hummed in every kitchen, keeping milk cold and fruit crisp, families relied on one thing to fight both spoilage and the summer heat: the icebox. These wooden chests, lined with metal and insulated with cork or sawdust, held large blocks of ice that slowly melted over days, cooling the contents inside. But the ice didn't magically appear. It was delivered, often daily, by the neighborhood iceman. He would arrive in a horse-drawn wagon. By the neighborhood iceman. He would arrive in a horse-drawn wagon, later in rumbling trucks, carrying massive blocks of ice with iron tongs slung over his shoulder, protected only by a leather pad. Children would run out to meet him, hoping for chips of ice to suck on, a frozen treasure in the middle of sweltering afternoons. Inside the home, ice was more than food preservation. On the hottest days, families found creative ways to use it for comfort. Mothers dropped ice chips into lemonade pitchers, turning ordinary drinks into a rare luxury. Fathers set bowls of ice before electric fans to chill the air, while children pressed slivers of melting ice to their foreheads and wrists, laughing as the shock of cold spread through their bodies. Entire neighborhoods relied on this daily ritual, with households marking their delivery needs on a card placed in the window so the iceman knew how big a block to leave. It was an entire industry, woven into the rhythm of American life, one that connected kitchens, communities, and survival. But as electric refrigerators spread in the 1940s and 50s, the iceman's visits dwindled and soon disappeared. What was once a lifeline turned into a relic of the past, a reminder of how families once fought the heat with ingenuity, muscle, and the steady arrival of frozen blocks carved from ice houses. The icebox era may be gone, but for those who lived through it, the clink of ice in a glass on a scorching day still carries echoes of an entire way of life built around staying cool before modern air conditioning changed everything. In the arid deserts of the American Southwest, where summer heat didn't just linger but scorched, families turned to an invention that became a lifeline long before air conditioning arrived: the evaporative cooler, better known as the swamp cooler. First appearing in the 1930s, this simple yet brilliant device worked with nature rather than against it. Hot, dry air was pulled through pads soaked in water, and as the air passed through, the water evaporated, dramatically lowering the temperature. What emerged was a stream of cool, refreshing air, blown into the house like a gift from the desert winds. In places like Arizona, New Mexico, and West Texas, swamp coolers weren't just conveniences, They were survival tools. Unlike traditional air conditioners that relied on refrigerants and compressors, swamp coolers were affordable, energy efficient, and perfectly suited to dry climates. On blistering afternoons, the sound of a swamp cooler humming on a rooftop was a promise of relief, filling living rooms and bedrooms with air that smelled faintly of rain, earthy and cool. Children would sprawl on the floor in front of the vents, laughing as the chilled breeze rushed over them, while parents finally found the strength to cook, clean, or rest without being drained by the relentless desert heat. But swamp coolers weren't flawless. In humid climates, they lost their magic. The air, already heavy with moisture, refused to absorb more water, leaving the machine little more than a noisy fan. Yet, in the deserts of the Southwest, they became a household standard, bridging the gap between primitive cooling hacks and the modern air conditioning revolution. For many families, the swamp cooler wasn't just about temperature. It was about dignity, about being able to sleep through a July night or sit at the dinner table without beads of sweat rolling down every face. It represented a kind of ingenuity uniquely tied to place, proof that even before Freon and compressors dominated the cooling industry, Americans were finding ways to carve comfort out of the harshest conditions. Before the modern luxury of temperature control, people learned to adapt their entire lives to the rhythm of the summer heat. Clothing wasn't about fashion statements, it was about survival. Men wore light-colored cotton or linen suits that let the air circulate and reflected the sun's rays, while at home, many would strip down to thin undershirts or go shirtless entirely. Women favored loose-fitting cotton dresses, sleeveless when modesty allowed, garments that breathed and didn't trap sweat. Children, wild and carefree, often ran barefoot in nothing but shorts or simple sunsuits, their small bodies slick with heat, but free from heavy, stifling fabrics. Synthetic fibers like polyester, so common today, were unimaginable in summer life back then. Natural fabrics ruled because they worked with the body instead of against it. But it wasn't just clothing that changed. Entire daily schedules bent to the will of the sun. People instinctively knew that the hours between noon and 4 were dangerous, the kind of heat that could bring exhaustion or worse. So the culture adapted. Farmers and laborers rose at dawn, worked furiously through the cool morning hours, and then rested during the hottest stretch of the day. Families stayed inside in shaded rooms or napped in hammocks, embracing the siesta long before it became a borrowed word in American culture. Housework followed the same rhythm. Baking bread, ironing clothes, or canning vegetables were chores reserved for early morning or late evening, never in the blazing afternoon when even striking a match felt unbearable. Life slowed down, not out of laziness, but out of necessity. The heat demanded respect, and ignoring it could be deadly. Evenings became sacred. As the sun dipped and the air softened, people returned to their tasks, finished their farm work, or sat on porches to socialize. Communities came alive at dusk, as if the world had been holding its breath all afternoon, waiting for the chance to exhale. Without air conditioning, summer wasn't just a season. It was a pace of life, one that demanded humility and taught entire generations the art of endurance. While homes remained stifling in the summer heat, the public sphere gradually became a place of relief, offering what private households could not. In the 1920s and 30s, movie theaters and large department stores became pioneers of a new technology that sounded almost too good to be true: refrigerated air. This wasn't just a feature, it was a selling point. Theaters plastered the words on their marquees, luring in crowds who wanted escape not only from the ordinary, but from the suffocating heat of July afternoons. For the price of a movie ticket, A person could sit in a darkened theater, feel cool air cascade over them, and forget about the misery outside for a couple of hours. For many, the film was secondary. It was the air conditioning that was the true attraction. Theaters became some of the most popular destinations of summer, their success tied directly to the promise of comfort. The same transformation spread to department stores. Shoppers suddenly had an excuse to linger, to window shop in icy halls, where the air itself seemed to sell the products. Retailers quickly realized that a cool customer was a happy customer, and foot traffic soared in the hottest months of the year. Entire families made outings to these places, not because they needed anything, but because it was a free chance to cool off. This blending of business and comfort reshaped summer commerce, proving that air conditioning wasn't just about relief. It was about profit, culture, and social change. But public spaces weren't the only answer. For children, the hottest days of the year turned into opportunities for simple joys that required no machines. Neighborhoods came alive with the hiss of sprinklers spinning in yards, their spray cutting arcs of glittering water that sent children squealing with laughter as they ran through again and again. In the city, fire hydrants became fountains of life. A wrench and a willing hand could turn a street into a water park, with dozens of children racing through the powerful gush, cooling their bodies in the simplest, purest way possible. These moments weren't luxuries, they were lifelines, reminders that heat could be endured together, that community itself was a kind of air conditioning. Swimming holes, rivers, creeks, and lakes became gathering spots too. Families piled into wagons or walked dusty roads for the chance to plunge into cool water, to feel for a moment as though summer's grip had loosened. Alongside this, the flavors of the season helped beat the heat. Lemonade stands appeared on corners, glasses sweating in the sun as children sold their tart, sweet relief to thirsty neighbors. Popsicles melted faster than they could be eaten, dripping down wrists and staining shirts. But no one cared. It was part of the joy, part of the shared fight against the season. All of these traditions, from porch gatherings to ice deliveries, from swamp coolers to hydrant sprays, were more than survival strategies. They were the building blocks of community life, experiences that shaped how generations remembered summer before modern cooling came along. And then, everything changed. With the arrival and eventual affordability of home air conditioning, life shifted indoors. Porches emptied, sleeping porches disappeared, and siestas gave way to the steady hum of machines that kept houses at a perfect, unchanging temperature. Families no longer had to gather outside for relief, no longer had to rely on neighbors or adapt to the rhythm of the sun. Comfort became individual, private, and climate-controlled. Air conditioning didn't just cool our homes, it reshaped our culture. It altered the way houses were built, eliminating tall ceilings, transom windows, and cross-ventilation designs. It changed the way businesses operated, with shopping malls replacing outdoor markets and theaters thriving in every season. Even our daily rhythms shifted. Work could continue through the heat of the afternoon, kitchens could run ovens in July, and children spent more summers indoors. Something was gained, but something was lost. The creativity, the resilience, the togetherness forged by the battle against summer heat slowly faded. What was once a communal challenge became an individual convenience. And yet, looking back, there's a certain beauty in how people endured, in the way they found joy despite discomfort, in the way necessity created culture. The hum of a modern AC unit may be the sound of comfort, but the sound of children laughing through a sprinkler, the clink of ice delivered by an iceman, the murmur of neighbors on a porch at dusk. Those are the sounds of a world that beat the heat together. So the question remains, if you didn't have air conditioning, how would you stay cool during the summer heat? Drop a comment down below and tell us which of these timeless traditions you'd bring back.